Welcome to Armstrongism Investigated, where we explore the truths and uncover the controversies within Armstrongism. This episode, we tackle a critical issue: racism. Join us as we shine a light on hidden histories and challenge beliefs, one episode at a time.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Okay, good. Today we're going to be looking at something pretty troubling, honestly.
Yeah.
The racial teachings of Herbert W. Armstrong.
Oh, wow.
Founder of Armstrongism. Yeah. So we're going to be primarily using an issue of the Plain Truth magazine from 1963 as our main source here.
Okay. And of course, 1963, very significant year historically, right in the middle of the civil rights movement.
Exactly. Huge social change happening all over the place.
Yeah.
So let's jump right into it. I guess the article we're looking at is about interracial marriage.
Okay.
And what's really strange is that Armstrong claims that he doesn't want to take sides, you know,
Right.
but that he presents God as like the author of racial segregation.
Mm.
How does that even work?
Well, that's what makes Armstrong's writing so difficult, because he's trying to walk this really, really fine line.
Yeah.
He acknowledges the discrimination that Black people are facing in America, but he never condemns it. And instead, he kind of leans on this idea that God created the races to be separate.
Right? It's like he's almost justifying segregation.
Yeah, it's almost like he's trying to explain it away.
It's a slap in the face, honestly,
Wow.
to recognize the injustice, but then to cling to this idea of segregation.
And that's where we see Armstrong really depart from traditional Christianity, because the Bible very clearly, especially in Acts 17.26, states that all nations descended from one man.
Right.
So this idea of race, it's kind of meaningless, theologically speaking, in the eyes of God.
Okay, but how does he twist Scripture to fit his views then?
Yeah.
Because he even quotes Genesis 6.
Right.
You know, the sons of God taking wives from whoever they choose, and then ultimately, of course, the flood comes as a result.
Yeah, he seems to be implying that the flood was a punishment for interracial marriage.
Right.
And that's not how that passage is generally understood in mainstream Christianity. The flood narrative in Genesis is usually interpreted as God's judgment on the wickedness and sin in the world at that time.
Man, this is just getting me so frustrated reading this.
Yeah.
You know, this guy's supposed to be like a religious leader,
Yeah.
and he's espousing these views that are just so wrong.
Yeah.
It's just incredibly disappointing.
What's really troubling is how he uses these distorted interpretations of Scripture to justify segregation within his own church.
Oh, he does?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. How does he even do that?
He advocates for separate social gatherings for different races.
Wow.
And even discourages interracial dating among his followers.
So he condemns interracial marriage, but then forgets that the Bible never actually says that you can't do it.
Exactly. And remember that passage in Acts 17.26.
Yeah, about God determining the boundaries of their habitation.
Right. Well, he tries to use that verse to justify segregation, too.
Really?
Yeah. But the context of that passage, it's talking about geographical boundaries of nations,
Right.
not racial segregation within society. So it's another example of him taking Scripture out of context.
To support his own agenda.
Exactly. It's confirmation bias,
Yeah.
He's already decided what he believes, and then he's just looking for anything in the Bible to support it.
Okay, there's this other part in the article that just blows my mind.
Okay.
He goes on this whole rant about all these different movements for global unity, like the common market in Europe.
Wow.
And he even throws in the Pope's efforts for interfaith dialogue.
Mm.
It's like he lumps them all together as this big conspiracy by Satan to undermine God's plan for racial segregation.
It's almost comical how he paints all of these things together.
Because like he's seeing boogeymen everywhere he looks,
It's this intense fear that racial mixing is like an apocalyptic threat.
Yeah, and that fear-mongering is a really dangerous element of his teaching.
Yeah, it preys on people's anxieties and prejudices.
Right.
And creates this climate of suspicion and division.
It's a very real example of how religious beliefs can be twisted to support hateful ideologies.
Absolutely. And it just highlights how important it is to think critically about everything.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to religious teachings.
Right. We can't just blindly accept what anybody says, no matter how authoritative they seem.
Yeah.
You're so right. We need to be able to discern between teachings that align with the true spirit of Christianity,
Right.
and those that are just somebody's personal biases disguised as religious doctrine.
Exactly.
It really makes you wonder, if Armstrong was so wrong about race, What other areas of his teaching might be just as suspect?
That's a really important question.
Yeah.
And it leads to an even bigger point. How do we even approach religious teachings?
Right.
Especially when they seem to go against our understanding of basic human decency and morality.
Yeah.
What does it mean to really engage with Scripture in a way that is faithful and ethical?
These are big questions.
Yeah.
And I think we need to keep them in mind as we continue this deep dive into Armstrong.
I agree.
This is turning out to be a lot more complex and challenging than I initially thought.
Yeah, but these are conversations that we need, especially if we want to understand how someone like Armstrong could gain followers and influence people with such harmful ideas.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
it's just really disheartening to see how someone can twist Scripture, you know?
Yeah, to fit their own agenda. Like, he's using religion as a shield to protect his own bigotry.
Yeah.
But let's go back to these, like, distorted interpretations for a second.
Okay.
What was the impact of these teachings on his followers?
Right.
Did they ever push back against this stuff?
Well, there's this really interesting anecdote in Herbert W. Armstrong, the racist,
Okay.
where one of his followers wrote to him expressing concern
Okay.
that his teachings on race just weren't really lining up with the growing civil rights movement.
Yeah, so how did that go?
Not well.
Oh.
He responded very defensively
Oh, wow.
and actually accused the follower of being influenced by like liberal and satanic ideologies.
Oh, my goodness. He couldn't even entertain the idea that he might be wrong.
No, it doesn't seem like it. It's unbelievable.
And that's something we see a lot with people like Armstrong.
Yeah.
You know, they create this, like, closed system of belief where any disagreement
Yeah.
is immediately seen as hostile or even demonic.
So basically, he made an echo chamber where he could just say whatever he wanted and nobody would challenge him.
Yeah.
That's so disturbing.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that Armstrong's teachings weren't just these abstract theological ideas.
Right.
They had real consequences for people's lives.
Right. Especially in his church.
Exactly.
So how did these teachings actually like play out in the lives of his followers? Did they really live totally segregated lives?
From what we know, Armstrong actually enforced segregation within his own church.
Wow.
Like, there were separate congregations for black and white members,
Right.
and interracial marriage was completely forbidden.
That's crazy.
It's a really stark reminder of how deep prejudice can run,
Yeah.
even in a religious context. It's sad. You know, he had this platform, and he could have used it to speak out against injustice,
Right.
promote unity and understanding.
Yeah.
But instead, he chose to just keep these systems of oppression going, you know?
Yeah. And what's really sad is that his teachings still have an impact today.
Really?
Yeah, there are still these offshoots of Armstrong's church, the Worldwide Church of God, that still cling to these segregationist ideas.
It's just a reminder that we can't ignore these parts of history.
Right.
We have to confront them head on and learn from the mistakes that were made.
Yeah.
It's the only way to prevent these beliefs from continuing to poison people's minds.
We need to have these open and honest conversations.
Yeah.
Race, religion, and the dangers of religious extremism.
Yeah, it's important to understand how someone like Armstrong could present himself as a devout Christian,
Right.
but hold these deeply prejudiced views.
Yeah.
It's just mind-boggling.
Yeah. This whole deep dive has been really eye-opening
Yeah.
in a kind of disturbing way.
Yeah, it has.
But it's been necessary.
Right.
It forces us to face the fact that even people who say they are guided by faith can hold beliefs that completely go against basic Christian values.
It makes you question everything.
Yeah.
Like, if he was so wrong about race,
Right.
what else could he have gotten wrong?
Yeah.
It just really shows how important it is to always be questioning, you know?
Right.
Always seeking understanding and never just blindly accepting someone's interpretation of faith.
You got it.
Yeah.
We can't just passively take in information,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to something as important as faith, you know?
Right.
We need to be active participants, engaging with Scripture thoughtfully, and be willing to challenge even our most deeply held beliefs.
This has been a good reminder that the search for truth and justice,
Yeah.
it never ends.
Yeah.
You know, it's a constant journey
Right.
that requires us to be aware of all forms of prejudice,
Yeah.
even those that are disguised as religious piety. You know, it's really sad to think that this kind of prejudice could take root in a religious community.
Right.
You would think a belief system all about love and compassion would be immune to this kind of thinking.
You'd think so. Yeah.
But history shows us over and over again that even the best intentions can get twisted, you know?
For sure.
It makes you think about the power dynamics in religious organizations.
Yeah.
How could so many people be swayed by someone with such harmful ideas?
That's a really good point, and it shows how important critical thinking is.
Yeah.
It's easy to just follow a charismatic leader.
Especially when they say they have God's authority.
Exactly. But as we've seen with Armstrong, it can lead to some really bad things.
We've talked a lot about his views on race
Right.
and how they go against traditional Christianity. But I keep coming back to this question.
Yeah.
If he was so wrong about something as basic as human equality, what else did he get wrong?
That's the big question, isn't it? And
Yeah.
it's one that everyone has to figure out for themselves. But I think this deep dive has given us some tools to work with. Can't just accept religious teachings at face value. To look at the historical context,
Yeah.
the logic behind them, and most importantly, how they line up with love, compassion, and justice.
I think that's a really powerful takeaway for our listeners. It's not about abandoning faith.
Right.
It's about approaching it with a healthy amount of skepticism and curiosity.
Exactly. Faith is a journey, not a destination.
Well said.
And that journey requires us to always be questioning and learning and challenging ourselves.
I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
Yeah.
It's been heavy but important.
Her eye-opening.
So to our listeners, as you continue on your own journeys,
Yeah.
remember what we've talked about today. Be critical,
Yeah.
be discerning, and don't be afraid to question authority.
And let love, compassion, and justice guide you.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, see you next time.
Keep searching, keep questioning, and keep fighting for a better world.
Thanks for joining us on Armstrongism Investigated. Stay tuned for our next episode as we continue exploring the murky underworld of religious cults. Until next time, stay informed and stay safe.